dream again. Please don't give up on your future.
Welcome to Life Interrupts Us, the podcast. I'm your storyteller, Stephen Wayne, and tonight I have some in-studio guests that are going to be conversing with me, not to be confused with conversate, which used to did not be a word until recently, but I don't like it, so I don't use it. Yes, I have two beautiful ladies that are going to converse with me on tonight. My beautiful wife, Mika, and my lovely daughter, Milan. Say hello, ladies.
Hey.
Oh, yeah. And they are going to be sitting in on this episode with me. Tonight's episode is a continuation of my journey as a creative. This season, season 2, we're focused on the journey of the creatives. We focused on relationships in season 1, and we talked about all kinds of stuff. But in season 2, I have several guests that I'm interviewing, talking to, having conversations with about their journeys as a creative. But I too am a creative. Podcasting is just the most recent thing in my creative world. But I started out as a singer, songwriter, producer, and then turned author, entrepreneur, and podcaster now. But I've also spent decades in the beauty industry as a hairstylist, as a creative. And so we'll talk about that in another episode. But tonight, I want to finish talking about my musical journey. I've spent 2 episodes talking about my journey and what it looks like and what I've done, what I haven't done. I've named some names. I talked about Bobby Brown. I talked about Fred Hammond. I talked about Bobby Rose of the Rose Brothers. But now it's time for me to continue on with the journey. One of the things that I do need to backtrack to is a particular element of my musical journey. In the last episode where I talked about time that I spent singing in Marla Gibbs Club, Marla's Memory Lane in Leimert Park, California, I didn't tell this aspect, and because it ties into the hairstylist aspect, I was gonna save it, but I think because my wife and daughter are in here, I think this is a fun time to talk about that. So let's kick this off like this. Again, when I was a hairstylist, a young hairstylist, I hung out at a lot of the older folks clubs. I hung out at the young clubs too because I was also a choreographer and dancer. I was very into the dance culture in the 80s. But while I was working as a hairstylist, a young stylist, my mentor, Doris Mosley, shout out to Doris Mosley, she gave me a call and said that a friend of hers wanted to borrow me for a little while. He wanted to borrow my services as an assistant. Now, for those of you who don't know what an assistant is, because I know the hair industry has changed dramatically. I'm going to say this. I said this last season. Women, take them wigs off. Stop gluing that stuff on. You're going to be bald. Your hairline's going to be missing forever. Take that stuff off. Let a hairstylist do your hair. Get back to it. My wife was a hairstylist for decades as well. My daughter gets her hair done by her hairstylist. A shout out to Monet over at 2nd Avenue Salon in Upland. Listen, you just cut it out. It's time. You've worn them glued on wigs long enough. You've worn them tied in and stitched in and clipped on wigs and weaves long enough. Let somebody give you a nice haircut and some nice color and shine and be a radiant queen. In the meantime, when I was young, Doris said, Steve, LIU&x wants to talk to you. Now, it's important that I break it down as to who LIU&x was. You hear some chuckling in the background because my wife has heard stories about LIU&x. She never got to meet him, though. So LIU&x, imagine this. Imagine if Full Force from the 80s had a older, bigger brother. Jerry curl, tapered on the sides, almost like a mohawk. He kind of wore like a mohawk back then. Um, but infuse that with pimps. Lee Mack wore a big uh, Mercedes gold diamond encrusted medallion with a big rope and big rings and Mercedes ring, Cadillac ring, just gaudy. Lee Mack though, that nigga could do some hair. He was cold blooded with the curling irons, and he owned a salon over off of 87th and Western in what we call Salon Row back then. It was just between 89th and 87th or 86. It was just like it had to be 40 salons. They were everywhere on that street on Western. But um, Lee Mack was a part-time pimp. Now, this is some of y'all who know Lee Mack or knew Lee Mack because Lee Mack passed. Shout out to Lee Mack. He passed, and so some of y'all might be like, "Oh, he lying on me, Lee Mack." No, 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 no. I'm telling you what Lee Mack told me himself. Lee Mack said he was a pimp, and Lee Mack kept women around him at all times. Now, Lee Mack had a preference though. Lee Mack liked big, beautiful women. He loved the BBWs. The bigger, the more beautiful, the better. He loved them. It didn't matter if you had a enlarged hourglass shape like my lovely wife does, or if you had a big back. He loved big women. And if they were pretty in the face, oh, it was even more. He loved them. So Lee Mack kept all these women around him all the time. So Lee Mack said, "Hey Steve, I need you to come help me out." His assistant had quit or had left. Something happened to her, and he needed an assistant. Now back in the day, assistants were the ones who did the shampooing, did the perms in some instances, did the color in some instances, and the blow drying. And now, if you were really on it, you also did the pressing. But Lee Mack, he permed almost everybody, so there wasn't a whole lot of pressing going on. So Lee Mack calls and says, "Hey man, I want you to come and I want you to work for me." Now, Lee Mack, we used to hang together at Marla's Memory Lane. And so Lee Mack was a friend. He was family. He and Doris were tight, and he was the homie. So if Lee Mack wanted me to come work with him, I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity to have these stories. And I knew I was going to get some. So one night we're at Marla's Memory Lane. And remember, if you paid attention to the other episode, I talked about how Marla's had a couple of nights of the week that were open mic, where anybody could get up and sing. Now, Lee Mack ran with a whole crew of pimps, but many of them were like junior pimps. They weren't like these dudes. I think had day jobs.
I got a couple questions.
Okay, all right. Go on, shoot it.
So you said he had a crew. I'm trying to see what his status was, and you had mentioned earlier that he wore a lot of rings, and he had a Cadillac ring and a Mercedes ring and all that. Did he own a Cadillac or a Mercedes or both?
I want to say Lee Mack drove a Jag and a Mercedes. He had or he may have had a Mercedes and a Cadillac. He had a couple of them. He had the stuff. His salon was called Jagged Edge, and it was checkered black and white floor with pink walls, and it was laid out.
All right.
Lee Mack had style.
Was any of the business, like, were there any commingling moments?
No.
Okay.
No. Lee Mack did not play about his money.
Okay.
He was very serious about his money, and I'm on my way to that, so that will help crystallize what you just asked.
Oh, one more question.
All right, one more question.
I think you told me. No, you didn't. But explain to me, did Lee Mack ever tell you why he liked big, beautiful women?
No, he did not.
Okay.
He never did. He did not talk about that. And I never asked. I mean, I loved women of all sizes, so it didn't matter to me. But the women that would be around him were absolutely gorgeous, whether they were big or small.
Mm-hmm.
They were just beautiful girls. So one night we're at.
Yeah.
Mhm.
the PITs, the pimps in training.
Okay, so right. See, this is why I asked my wife and my daughter to be on this episode because I know it's gonna be crazy. Okay, so he had these pimps that were underneath him, right? One of them, I think his name was Johnny. Johnny had a busted Jerry curl. You know when the Jerry curl can't really get no length on it, no matter what you do. When you see him over the course of several months and his hair is the same length, that means his hair is not responding well to the Jerry curl chemical stuff. Um, and Johnny was cool. Johnny didn't have as he tried to be flashy like Lee Mack, but he didn't quite have it. He had a more like a busted Cadillac. His rings were way smaller. His gold chains were like dainty because back then we all rocked gold just like they rocking gold now. The way they rocking gold now is how we rocked it in the 80s. You know, the gaudy ropes and the big medallions and all that. So I had my nice gold rope and I had a eagle medallion that I used to rock. So, and I had a couple of diamond gold rings. So, so we're at Marla's Memory Lane one night, just hanging out. Lee Mack was like, "Hey, Steve, you gonna sing, man? You gonna sing tonight, man? Go on up there, Luther, kill him," because Luther Vandross is what I mostly did. And I said, "Nah, man, I'm chilling tonight." So Muhammad, who was the host, Muhammad calls up Johnny, and we looking, and Lee Mack looked at me and laughed, and I didn't know why he was laughing. It was his boy Johnny, the pimp. Johnny goes up on stage and starts singing in what equivalates to yodeling. He was terrible. And so I was, I thought all of the pimps were like gangsters too. So I didn't laugh at none of them. I didn't strip off none of them. I would be around them, but I was just cool. I didn't want no trouble. Lee Mack is smiling and had his drink, and Lee Mack had a ring on his pinky that was about this big, that looked like a Lakers championship ring. It was humongous. I wonder if they buried him in all that stuff, or did the gold diggers literally dig the gold? Anyway,
When did he pass away?
I don't know. I want to say in the last few years. I have to fact check that. So so fast forward. We're at the shop. He calls me, asked me to come work at his shop. I'm like, cool. How long you need me to work there? He said, I don't know, man. Maybe 3 or 4 weeks. We'll see how it goes. Now, I wasn't making a whole lot of money working at Doris's as an assistant. I was still in beauty school at the time too. But Doris had like 4 assistants. Doris was doing anywhere from 40 to 50 people a day. It was incredible to watch her work.
Crazy.
It was crazy. But again, she had 4 assistants. So she didn't touch the hair until it was time to either press it or cut and curl it. She didn't do no chemical work,
No blow drying.
no blow drying. More times than not, no pressing. Cousin Carol, shout out to Carol. She was my cosmetology school running mate. We were in school together, but she got out a little bit before I did. But she was Doris's cousin. She became Doris's lead assistant, and her sister Sissy, Doris's sister Sissy. Shout out to Sissy. Sissy's not doing well. Y'all pray for my auntie Sissy in Florida, or no, in Georgia. I'm sorry. Shout out to her. They did most of the pressing. So Doris very, very rarely picked up a pressing comb. And if she did, it was just to go back over a little bit because they were good at what they did. Her assistants were polished. And so she was literally able to crank out a head in about 30 minutes, cut and curl. And that's a story that I will tell when I have Lily on, because her daughter Lily's coming on, and we're gonna talk about the hair life.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Yes. So okay, so I was in school. I wasn't really making any money working for Doris as an assistant because I was in school all day. I'd go over there after school, and Doris didn't really need me like that. I would just go and learn, but she didn't need me as an assistant. She already had a house full of stylists at her shop. So for me, working for Lee Mack was an opportunity because I was gonna make some money, but that meant leaving school because he needed an assistant like 4 days a week. And I was cool with that. So I tell him I'm gonna work, and then I get over there, and the first week, Lee-Mac paid me $150. Now back then, for an assistant,
That was good.
I was like, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna work for Lee-Mac forever. I'll even work at his shop because he didn't even have anybody in there working besides himself. But the second week, Johnny comes through because every week some of the pimps would roll through.
You mean the yodeler?
Johnny rolls through. And so Lee-Mac says, hey, what's up, boy? What's going on? You know, they're talking, and he comes over to me, hey, Steve-O, what's up? Because they call me Steve-O. Hey, Steve-O, what's up, boy? You know, boy, when you going to come up back to the club and sing? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be up there this week. Oh, man, yeah, you be killing with that Luther, boy. You be killing the ladies and everything with that Luther. I'm like, yeah, that's what's up. So Johnny starts singing Luther.
Oh.
And I can't even mimic what Johnny was doing. But when Johnny left, Lee-Mac said, that nigga can't sing. Steve-O. That nigga, he just yody. That's what it sound like at the club, and that's what it sound like in it. That nigga can't sing. You need to stick to pimping. I was like, oh my God. So I'm laughing because he, you know,
Wow.
if he had said that in front of Johnny, I wouldn't have laughed. I would have just held it to myself. So I worked for Lee-Mac, and after about 3 or 4 weeks, it was time to go. Things changed with the money, and things got funny. But Lee-Mac was still my guy.
I would
yes.
like to provide some context.
Uh-oh.
So $150 in 1980 is equivalent to about $578.28 today.
Okay, so that's 1980. We can move up to 1980, 88, 87. 87. I was working for him in 1987. But still, that, I mean, for a 19-year-old, that's like $2,000 a month. That's the equivalence of $2,000 a month.
So $419.46.
Almost $200 a month, $2,000 a month. That was good money. If you don't have no bills, you're smart enough not to have no babies and no credit cards, you're doing all right, and no car payment. Shoot, I was balling. $150, I was balling, but it didn't stay $150.
It was only that one time, huh?
Lee-Mac the pimp. So anyway, Lee-Mac,
Hit ya.
one of
Hit
Lee-Mac's,
ya.
one of his favorite sayings, he had 2 favorite sayings. Because when he was talking about Johnny, after Johnny had left, he said, Johnny need to just lay down, dog, you're dead. Lay down like a dog, a dead dog. And I was like, and he would do his hand like this. He just need to lay down like a dog is dead. I was like, lay down like a dog, you dead. Okay, all right. And then Lee-Mac would say, pimping ain't easy, but it's necessary. Now, of course, everybody says that. However, Lee-Mac would end it with, and it must be done in a Rolls Royce. I was like, what? But this nigga didn't have no Rolls Royce.
Wow.
Yeah, Lee-Mac was crazy.
Wow.
So that was, you know, that was back in that phase. I just thought I'd recap that. At Mike Henry's Barbecue Company, we are passionate about delivering not just the best food, but the best experience. Nestled in the heart of Rancho Cucamonga, our mission is to treat every guest like family, offering mouth-watering barbecue that's slow cooked to perfection and served with a smile. From our tender brisket to our savory ribs, each dish is crafted with love and attention to detail. Our dedicated team goes the extra mile to ensure every visit is memorable, blending friendly, attentive service with a warm, inviting atmosphere. At Mike Henry's Barbecue Company, we don't just serve food, we serve happiness. But fast forward now, because in the last episode, I talked all the way through when I got ready to put my first record out.
Mm.
And back then, I had started producing my own music. I spent a lot of time in the lab producing my own stuff, kind of honing my craft. And Mika, my wife, she wasn't my wife then, but Mika was my premier background singer because my wife could sing. And we used to spend a lot of time in the studio working on music. And um, honestly, though, I was afraid. I was afraid to put my music out. Um, I grew up without a father. And for people who grow up without a parent, it leaves an imbalance mentally and emotionally. And fathers are often considered the validators, while mothers are considered the nurturers. Fathers tell you the truth. They tell you if you're good or not. You know, they tell you you can do it. Mamas tell you it's gonna be all right. Whether you do it or not, baby, you're gonna be all right. But fathers tell you you can do it, and I didn't get that. My grandfather was my father. We all called him daddy, um, and he was my dad. But I saw him take care of his family. I saw him work every day except Sunday. I saw him be a man of God, very honorable man. I saw him love on his family and provide for his family financially, but he did not ever have a whole lot to say. So, growing up as a singer in a family full of singers, um, you know, and then I talked about this in the first episode that I talked about how my grandmother, when I was 7 years old, told me that I need to sing with feeling and with the spirit and with some excitement because that's what the people that's what moves the people. And because I wasn't that kind of singer, those things, not having a voice to say, hey son, you're great, you're gonna be great, do your thing, it messed me up. And so I also, because my father wasn't there, the ghost in my ear was him telling me, you suck, because of his absence. You're not going to be successful at it. There are so many other people that sing better than you. And what's interesting is everybody that would hear me sing would be like, oh my God. And you're one of the best singers I've ever heard. I heard that a lot, but it didn't sink in because there was this other voice that was telling me. And so when I started um, thinking about braving the subject of putting out my own first album, it was daunting. But my wife, who was not my wife at the time, said something to me one time. We were in the studio, and she said, "Steve, you need to put your music out. You're one of the best singers I've ever heard." And I was like, "Wow, you." And my wife has great taste in music. She loves music. You know, that there are, I talked about in the other episode how New Edition was the chief group at the time. And so if you were going to be somebody, it was because you were going to be compared to them or their status. So I never got to that. I mean, I met Bobby Brown and pitched a song to him, but it never really happened. All that kind of stuff. Um, I should have just went on and dated his baby mama, and then that would have flipped things a bit. Because that was a situation. But I won't get into that. So when Mika said that, when you said that, babe, and I've shared this with you before, it Mika was, at the time, she wasn't my wife, she was my best friend. My best friend spoke to my heart, but more importantly, my best friend's words pierced through the shell of fear, or the headphones of fear that I was wearing, that had kept my ears so covered that I couldn't even hear my own voice.
Yeah, and that I had no idea was even an issue.
Yeah, I never talked about it. My mom would always say, you always helping everybody else. You're always working on everybody else's music and doing stuff for everybody else. When you gonna do something for you? But the answer was, I'm not, because I'm afraid. I just never answered it because I couldn't. I don't wear my feelings that far off from my chest. So I carry stuff, and I just carry it. Um, I'm working on that, by the way, because the more you carry, the slower you walk. Um,
Yeah, that stuff
so
is heavy.
yeah, it is. It is. So when I when I agreed in my own soul to respond to what you said, Mika, heck, by that time I already had enough songs to drop 5 or 6 albums. And so I committed to finishing the album, to doing the album, picking the songs that were going to be on it, and then the songs we picked, then we kind of finalized them and went over some things and redid some vocals on some things and whatever. And then we put it out. But I remember the day that I finished it, and I had an emotional, not a breakdown, but a release. And I came out of the studio. I had a studio that was out of the home now. And I came out of my studio, and my mom was standing there, and I looked at her, and I had it in my hand. I had a CD in my hand, a master. And I said, "It's finished, it's finished." And I just bawled and bawled and bawled, and we embraced. And it was a dope moment. But it freed me. It freed me to go ahead and pursue what I should have been pursuing all along. And now we were in an age where I could do it myself. The digital age had come, and now I had become a master of the digital age. So much so that when I was working on some of my early music as a producer, I was recording in my kitchen, the breakfast nook of my kitchen. And I have an old high school associate. I was friends and classmates with his brother, but he is a guy that's partially responsible for B2K and some other groups. He's an industry guy, but back when we were in high school, he was the boy that got on our nerves. Shout out to Brian Peters and Eric Peters. That was my homie. His little brother Brian was an annoyance, but he was a musician back then in high school, and he made a name for himself in the industry. And so he and I were connecting, and he was very tied to a couple of record labels, and we were talking about him doing some stuff with me. So I sent him some music, and he said, "Man, your sound is nice." Now back then, I didn't even know what I was doing in terms of sound engineering and all that.
So I got a question, because you did all of that stuff. You said you didn't know what you were doing, but you had to know something
Well, I had an
about
ear.
it.
I didn't know what compression meant. I knew what reverb meant, but I didn't know how to appropriate it. I didn't know what limiters were. All the technical stuff that I know now, I didn't know.
But
So I didn't even
even
mess with any of that stuff.
So when you first started putting music out, you put it out with a producer who produced your stuff, or you did it on your own?
No. No. That was the first song. The only song I ever put out that I didn't produce early on was the single that I did with Larry Ball, and I talked about that in the last episode.
Mhm.
That was the cassette, "He Lives."
Right.
After that, I worked with producers, but we never put anything out.
Mhm.
When I finally put stuff out, it was all me. But I did not know all the technical nuances of what I was doing. I just knew how to operate the sequencing software, and I knew how to play what I wanted to play and make the beats and all the stuff.
So how did you learn that stuff? Because even that stuff,
Oh,
anybody can't just do
thank
that. How
God
did
for
you?
thank God for YouTube,
Okay.
trial and error.
Mhm.
I would read, because I'm a reader, so I would
Yeah.
read. Um, Sometimes I would read about the technical stuff and still wouldn't understand what it meant.
Mhm.
Like compression was something that escaped me for a very long time. I did not know what that meant or what it did. And when I would hit compression on something, I couldn't even really hear the difference because I didn't know what I was listening for. But Brian heard the stuff and said, "Man, what studio did you record that at? Man, your sound is nice." I was shocked. And I said, "I recorded that in my kitchen." He was like, "For real? Like on what?" And I told him, because at that time I had basic software. I didn't even have the high-end stuff. He
Yeah.
was like, "Man, okay, that's tight. Your sound is good, man. You already halfway there because you got a good sound." Now, from there I would tinker with it often because I would learn new things. I would learn new words and
Mhm.
terms and be like, "Oh, okay, let's try that." And I would add things. "Oh, let's try delay and see what we can do with that." Automation. When I learned what automation was, that was really fun. So a lot of things in trial and error. And because I was producing so much music, I was always in the studio. always working, always creating, all till the wee hours of the night. Um, you know, music production saved me when I was in a bad marriage because I was always in the studio working. It was my escape. I would leave work and just go to the studio. I would go home sometimes to change clothes and then go right back to the studio and wouldn't be asked anything about it either. So that saved me just being in there all night long. And it allowed me to hone my craft even more. But I still didn't know, because I talked about this in the other episode about how I was trying to figure out who I was as an artist. So when I put the first album out, my music was different. I did not produce to the radio. I didn't let the radio influence me. I had lived a long life of being around musicians and being around singers and being around various sounds. All I knew was that I was going to do some real dope vocal arrangement because I was good at that. And I came from a family that did a lot of pretty vocal arrangements. So
yes, you are good at that.
thank you, thank you. So I didn't know how it was going to be received, because at the time I was calling myself a gospel artist, but the music did not sound like gospel. Matter of fact, the music didn't sound like anything. There was no reference. My stuff didn't sound like the stuff that was on the radio. My stuff didn't sound like the urban gospel, like the Dawkins and Dawkins. My stuff didn't sound like anything except me. It was unique in that respect that you could hear my music and go, I've never heard any of this anywhere. And I was proud of that. I prided myself in that. However, so I put this album out, and I'll never forget this. One of Shanine's clients came to the concert, because I did a whole, concert. You were singing, and my CD release. And the CD release had live musicians. So that music took on a very different feel. My stuff was all digital and studio produced. There was no live music on it. And so the lady bought the CD, and a couple of weeks later, I saw her at the salon, and she said to me, Stephen Wayne, oh no, SP, because I was performing as SP. She said, SP, I want to tell you something. I want to talk to you. And I said, oh, hey, how you doing? I said, hey, did you enjoy the concert? She said, yes, I enjoyed the concert. I bought your CD. And I said, oh, well, thank you so much. She said, but listen, you got a really nice voice, but you need some new songs. It's like, what? I didn't even know what to do with that. She said, them songs, they don't sound like nothing. They don't sound like gospel. And I said, oh, okay. But that created a conundrum. It created a problem, because I already always felt like a fish out of water in the church. I didn't do all of that emotional singing, although I could, because by now, I talked in the other episode about the fact that I wasn't a riffer and a runner, but I learned how to become one, and then I still wouldn't use it because I would pull it out every now and then and, ooh, that was a bad run right there, and then I wouldn't do anymore, because I don't feel like you got to run every line and every sentence. It's like vocal acrobatics. It's like you wearing me out. I'm getting whiplash just listening to you sing. And it's hard to focus on the words, the lyrics, when the person is just doing all this stuff. So when she said that, that stuck with me. And I went on this pursuit to try. Let me see if I can try to get more church in my stuff. So I put out an EP.
I did not know that. We never talked about that.
I don't
That's
talk about a lot of
interesting.
stuff. I guess I do need to talk about more stuff. I put out another EP that had some very different feel in it. It still wasn't church, but it was because I have the ability to produce a wide range of sound. I'm a musical library, both in terms of the sounds and in terms of the history of music. So I'm influenced by all these different sounds. So I did an EP with 5 songs, or maybe 7 on 'em, 6 or 7 on them. And I was going to Detroit. And so um, I get to Detroit, and it had been set up for me to sing in a couple of churches. One of them was a really big church, it had thousands of members. So I took boxes and boxes of product. I had the first CD, Getting Clearer, and then I had this EP called Only Him. And I sang at 3 different places in Detroit, and I sold out of everything. Those people, and it was crazy. I was scared because Detroit is the mecca. It's the Motown of gospel. It's the Black Hollywood of gospel. And I just figured I'm not going to be received. But the historian in me should have known better, because you got the Clark sisters, you've got the Winans, you've got Commission, and then you got all these other urban groups. You got Pam and Dodie. I think they were from Detroit. You had all these different groups, but you also had all these different sounds. The Winans didn't do a lot of the churchy stuff. Their stuff was pretty and melodic, kind of reminded me of the Phillips Singers. And so I didn't think I was going to be embraced. Was I surprised? I was super embraced. I should have set up some things to go back, but back then it wasn't that easy to just hop up and move over to another state to do music if somebody wasn't paying you to be there. But I sold out of everything. I came back home with no product and a bag full of money. And I was like, okay, in my mind, all right, the church feeling me now. All right, we can do this. Now they were buying Getting Clearer because I was selling the package, you buy 2, but I performed a song from Getting Clearer and a couple of songs from Only Him, because Only Him was an EP that had heavier lyrics. I was like, okay, we can do something. Got back home, nope. I was like, all right, smooth jazz saved me, because my Getting Clearer album had the ability to cross over into smooth jazz for some of the stuff. And so I was able to utilize that lane, and this would be where I would meet Kamasi Washington and Thundercat, and where they would become parts of my band. Because when I came back from Detroit, I was ready. I was ready to roll. I was like, all right, let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And we started touring locally, and they transformed that music to the point where that music had a very different vibe, but we didn't perform at church. I was performing at jazz festivals and that kind of stuff, and my own events that I was starting to put together. And then I started thinking, maybe I'm not a gospel singer. And there was conflict there, because I felt like, well, you're a God man. You're supposed to be singing gospel now. You can't go be singing on R&B. And it was like, so I kept trying to fit and force the sound. I would put out another album, Turn the Corner, finally, which was a dope album, probably the best sonic quality album I've ever put out. That album
had it
was
on my radio. Was it radio? Whatever. My little blue MP3 player. That was the first album that I had on there.
right. So okay. So fun fact, Milan, your voice is the intro on Getting Clearer.
I knew that.
Yes, I mean, I know you knew that.
I remember.
Ladies and gentlemen, my daddy SP.
Period.
And then your brother Kalen was featured on the next album.
Right.
Oh no, before Turn the Corner, we did Soul Pleasure. And he was featured on that because he sat on my lap and farted.
Yes.
And sang a little bit.
Giggling.
but Soul Pleasure was the album where I really started shifting my vibe, because my voice, I found a place where my voice fit. My voice did not fit in church. We had tried the live album. That was a flop. I know you like that album. I hated it. There were too many things surrounding it that weren't right. It was super
Right.
contrived.
We had our own reasons for however we felt about it.
Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was trash. I was trash at the time. I had no
Mhm.
business doing a worship album. I was so out of line with God. I was so out of alignment with everything that was going on in my life. And I figured I discovered then in that moment how preachers and worship leaders and people who are in the church who are leaders get up and do what they do when their life is chaotic and a mess behind closed doors, and
Mhm.
they perform it well. Um, I said I'll never be that guy again. I will
Mhm.
never. I did not feel good about how I represented God or myself.
It was very layered.
Oh, it was terrible.
Your
There's so much going on.
your reasons
So much, so
for
much, so much
yeah.
going on. But from that experience, even the tour, because remember we went on a 10 church, 10-week tour to
Mhm.
tour that album. And church folk again. And that album would be probably as churchy as I was gonna get.
Mhm.
They wasn't feeling it. And I was like, okay, I quit. I'm just gonna do what I do and we'll figure out how to label it. So I do Soul Pleasure. And people kept calling it Soul Pleaser because it was spelled Pleazah. And it was a take on the title track, which was Soul Pleasure. That me and 𝐿IU&x Green, shout out to 𝐿IU&x Green, that we co-wrote. Actually, it was a song that was originally written for her. And then we parted creative ways, but I kept the song and changed some of the words and then put it out. But that that album, again, I'm still trying to find, this leg of my journey, I'm trying to find where I fit. So I set up a tour and I go to Seattle with my cousin who lived there at the time, Philip Sharp Skills Jacobs. Shout out to Sharp Skills. His company is one of the sponsors for this season, Rebel Firm. So shout out to Sharp Skills. Um, he set up a few events for me to perform, and I was excited. I had taken a different approach with Soul Pleasure. I was like, okay, this album's gonna be more urban, a little bit more hip hop to it, because I'm trying to find myself. And we go to Seattle, and we do all these different dates and events, but we don't sell a lot of product. And the last event we did was a church gig. And then people were sitting there looking at me like, and I did the only churchy song I had on the album. And it wasn't even really churchy, but the musician caught on to it. What's his name? DC, Derek Clark, or I think that's his name. He he caught on to. He does a lot of work with Fred Hammond, or has done some with him. He was playing. He was a musician at the time there, and he caught on to it and was like, and jumped on the song, and we kind of improvised, and then the church started feeling it because it had that live churchy feel to it. Well, all while I was singing it, though, I was standing in front of them folks at the church, looking at their faces, going, I don't even want to be here. They looking at me like, when is boy gonna sit down? But once Derek jumped on it, then they suddenly got the Holy Ghost. And I was
Because
like,
it gave
wow.
it that feel that
It
they
gave
were
it the
used
feel.
to.
And I was like, okay, I don't want to do this shit. I was just
So
like,
yeah. So what I hear you saying is uh that sometimes the church can be dream killers
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
because throughout your journey it just seemed like the people who were supposed to be the most loving and the most encouraging were the biggest negative critics.
Yeah, well, and not always negative critics, just negative energy,
Yeah.
negative response. And that I had, by now I had been used to that because that had been happening ever since I had decided to start singing in the church like that. And it was
Yeah.
like, wow. And I was always trying things that I felt like were authentic to me,
Mhm.
but I wanted to see how they worked at the church. And 9 times out of 10, they just didn't. And that day, standing there singing, I was singing praise offering. A praise offering is what I bring, so I can sing my song to you. I love that song. That
Mhm.
was probably one of the purest praise songs I've ever written. And they didn't feel it until the organ jumped on it. And to me, that's contrived. That means that you're wired to respond to an emotion. Your worship isn't pure. Because if you listen to what I was saying, the words of that song alone, don't know about you, but
Yeah.
um, don't know about you, but I am so grateful that he loves me so and he cares where I go. That alone should have you like, but not until the organ. And then them niggas started, oh, hey. And I was just like, I wanted the song to be over. I was ready to walk away, but I went on and played the game because now in my head, I'm like, all right, I got to sell some CDs to these niggas. So let me go on and because I do know how to do that churchy stuff. It's just not authentically me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna work on them for a minute. And I sold a bunch of CDs at that church, but I laughed because Praise Offering on that album was the only song on there that was like that, and it wasn't even like that. I
Yeah.
sang it to the track. So they heard the track. But once he jumped on it, then they
Yeah.
responded, and then they bought the album based on that little performance. But the rest of the album was all urban and had some rapping on it and some other stuff. I laughed. And I was talking to Phil about it, and he was like, man, that was a different crowd. I was like, man, see, this is why I don't even want to sing at the church no more. And
The
it-
conditioned responses you played into you have to play the conditioning game.
I don't want to do that. I was like, I'm just too real to be that guy. I'm not going to be a self-promoted puppet. It's like, no, I'm not going to be that guy. So the Seattle tour was fun, but it was a bust because we only had one event. We did like 4 or 5 events, but only one of them. They showed me some love on the radio. I got some love on the radio out there, which was cool, but only one of the events was really like dope, and it was because it was a bunch of young people. And like I had some songs that I had edited and made sure they were longer, so I brought people up to do some freestyles, and that was interesting because I know how to connect with young people, and at that time I was younger, so I was still young, but it left me. I remember on the flight home, I was sitting there in first class
Come on,
because
first.
I upgraded to first class.
Come on,
Alaska
upgrade.
Airlines, they got the hookup upgrade to first class. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are you going to do? I took all this product to Seattle. And unlike Detroit, I came home with most of it.
That's a different place too.
Well,
Different culture.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very different. And I started doing some real soul searching about, what I was doing. What am I doing? What am I doing?
Philip Sharp Skills Jacobs, from Los Angeles, California, native, born and raised there. I'm a hip hop artist, I'm a leadership speaker, I'm an author. Mainly, I'm a creative, and I'm excited and passionate about entrepreneurship and helping people realize their full God-given potential.
And so I said, you know what? Let's try to get a record deal. Get an engine behind us. Get some money behind us. So I set out, because by now you and I are married. You and I were married before I put Soul Pleasure out. I put Soul Pleasure out in 2006. I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to try to pursue this one last time. So I worked on some music and put together what I thought was a dope demo. And I'm about to do a whole lot of name dropping now. My wife's cousin, Debbie Foreman, was Quincy Jones' right hand for many years. Shout out to Quincy Jones, the late great Quincy Jones, and shout out to Debbie Foreman. That's cuz right there. I reached out to her because she worked for Quincy, and at the time he still had Quest Records. So I was like, hey, let me see what I can make happen. And I went. She set up a meeting. Unfortunately, the meeting was not with Quincy. I was hoping it was going to be. It was not. I didn't even get to meet him. And Quincy has always been one of my musical heroes. He and Dr. Dre and Warren Campbell. Those are my three. I'm sorry. And what's his name who produced for Duran Duran and 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐽? What is his name? Nile Rodgers. Those are my four. Nile Rodgers, Dr. Dre, Quincy Jones, Warren Campbell. Okay, and 5, Tommy Sims. That's it. Those are my guys. So I get to Quest Records and I'm super excited. I'm thinking I'm getting ready to meet some people and make some things happen. And I sit in a room with this white chick. I can't remember her name. She had already listened to my music. And she said, "You're a very talented writer." Now, I wasn't going there to be a writer. I was trying to be an artist. And I knew that Quincy Jones dibbled in gospel because the Winans were signed to him and a couple other people. So I knew he took a range of music. And because he was always good at picking out great talent, I figured if Quincy heard my voice, he would go, "Oh, that voice, I want to work with him." And although he was older and wasn't really doing music as much then, he was still in that game. So that was my mindset. Well, the lady told me that they really liked my writing and that and this is the weirdest thing when somebody says, "We wish that we really want to offer you a writing spot, a roster, or a writing spot on our roster." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll take it. But we don't have any spots." What the hell? What we do that for then? Why do that? Just say, "Hey, we like your stuff, and if something opens up where we can use it, we'll reach out to you." Just say that. Don't say, "You know what? I like the way you design suits. And I would order some from you. But I'm not looking for any right now." What the I didn't even understand. And I'm starting to think, or no, now I really think that God kept me out of some rooms that I was trying to get in for his own purpose and to keep me from destroying my life. Because I know what Hollywood has done to a lot of people. It hasn't done it to everybody, but it's done it to a lot. And at one point in my life, the darkness in me was very dark. So I was baffled though when she said that. I wore it on my face too. I was just like, and she's like, "No, we really, really like your writing. Don't say that. Don't say that again." That's what I wanted to say. Don't say that again. I'm ready to go. So they gave me a couple of trinkets, and they always give you stuff when you go to the labels. They give you everything except what you wanted. You wanted to get a yes and a deal. So I leave there. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And so I reached out to Randy Jackson. Shout out to Randy Jackson from MCA Records and from American Idol. Because years earlier, I was on a video shoot with a dear friend of mine, Puff Johnson. Shout out to Puff Johnson. She's no longer with us. She was a beautiful singer. You went to high school with her, didn't you? You go to high school, Puff?
Yeah, she went to the high school I went to. I think she was only there for a short period of
Yeah,
time.
yeah. She was like the Black Mariah Carey. And my cousin dated her at one point, so she was always at the house. But Puff was sweet, and my friend was doing her hair for her video shoot. And it was a song that Jermaine Dupri had produced. And so she invited me down to the video shoot. So I went down there and ended up helping out a little bit with hair and stuff. But Randy Jackson was the A&R person over her album. So I got a chance to meet him and talk to him. And he was so cool. This was when he was heavy, before he lost all the weight. He was so cool. Not that matters. It's like when people say skinny Luther, Big Jackson, Big Randy. Big Randy. He was so cool. And I was like, man, I said, I'm an artist, man. I do music. He's like, man, well, why don't you run me something? And I was like, man, come on, man. What's it gonna do? End up on the floor in your office? He said, no, 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 no. If you address it, he told me how to address it, what to put on it to make sure it got to him. And I was like, okay, all right. Well, I didn't, because at the time I wasn't ready.
What do you mean?
I didn't have stuff ready at the time, music wise. I wasn't. This was back before I was producing, so I wasn't producing. I was working with Kennard, and so I wasn't ready yet to get a package together to do that. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'm ready to do that. And so I put together some stuff. He was still at the label at the time, and I take it over there to him, but I don't meet with him. I just drop it off. I never heard from him. I don't know if he got it or not. You know, years have passed, and it was whatever. But he was really cool, and I would run into him. Between that time, I ran into him again because my homeboy and his sister were trying to get a deal with one of the labels, and Randy Jackson was at the showcase they did, and me and Kennard invited ourselves to the showcase, which was funny.
And you actually went?
Yeah, we went. His name was 𝐬𝐲, and his sister's name, oh, I forget her name. 𝐬𝐲 was a talented musician, and his sister was a really talented singer. And he was he was looking at it like, hey, what's up, man? What you doing? And he knew I could sing. Like, he knew I could really sing. So for him, I know what the look of competition is. He was looking like, why are you here? And his sister was looking like, why are they here? But me and Kennard was just there, like chilling, like, and Randy Jackson was there, and we was chopping it up with him. He was like, hey, what's up, man? Hey, what's up? And because I had met him already, we was cool like that. And they didn't like, you could tell they didn't like the fact that we were so chummy with Randy Jackson. But me and Kennard laughed about that all the way home.
I want to go back to
Go back.
when you said you weren't ready. Like, by then you had all kind of music.
No.
You had access to the
No.
studio.
No, I didn't. This was, see, when I started working with Kennard, and I talked about this in the last episode, when I started working with Kennard, I didn't have any music.
Oh, okay.
I was taking ideas to Kennard, but Kennard and I never finished a single song.
So this wasn't after you talked to Quincy.
No, this was before.
Oh,
This was
okay.
before.
Okay.
I'm time jumping a little bit.
Got it.
Yeah, this was before. But the Randy Jackson thing. However, now that I talked to Quincy, or Quincy's people, I did not talk to Quincy. Shoot, I was ready. Look, I was ready to go all out. I was ready to sing on the spot for Quincy, let him hear my voice, my golden voice, be like, wow, this guy sounds better than James Ingram. I was ready for all of that. None of that happened. But I said to you, I said, babe, I'm going to give this a certain amount of time, and I'm going to commit to a plan. I wrote it down.
Mhm.
I still have it somewhere too. I wrote down the plan and the agenda and what I was going to do.
Mhm.
And I mapped out a bunch of labels that I was going to go to. And I went to a couple of other labels. I met with a cat over at Columbia Records, and he said, yo, man, I like your stuff, man. Would you be interested in writing for someone and letting someone else do some of your music? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, cool. You know, I'm gonna keep your information, and never heard back from him. He was somebody that Kennard had turned me on to. And then after that, you know, I stumbled upon getting a manager. I had a manager for a minute. She owned that soul food restaurant. I can't remember her name though.
Oh,
Her name start with a V?
no, it start with a D.
Yeah, I can't remember her name. Her and her husband were at the church at the time.
It wasn't Dolores.
No, it wasn't Dolores.
Hmm.
But and
Doretha.
Doretha. Yes. Shout out to Doretha. Doretha was connected. She was connected to some major players because she used to be deep in the industry.
Mhm.
And for me, this was like kind of like not my last hope, because this had happened prior to all of that. I had a manager before you and I even got married, and that didn't materialize. So all these doors, I'm going back and forth in the storyline just to say all these doors kept closing, all these interruptions of life. just kept happening. And I found myself ready to quit. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I quit. And I remember you telling me, nah, we've invested, we've spent money on stuff. Because by now, I've got a studio with real stuff in it. I've built sound booths and all kind of stuff. And you're like, no, you can't quit. But I did not know where I belonged. And so I was like, man, the smooth jazz thing kind of tailored. Soul Pleasure got me a lot of traction with smooth jazz, and then that died out. And I was ready to do another record. So when it was time to do another record, I was going in a different direction. Turn the Corner, finally, was a new album. And that album was kind of birthed because of an epiphany that I had while we were in the Bahamas with Bishop Eddie Long and all of them folk, William Murphy and all them people, Gary Oliver and all them folk, them church folk that I don't, whatever. But I had an epiphany. So I came back and wrote a song. And then we wrote the album. Shout out to Rhonda Shane, my songwriting like sidekick. We've written a lot of music together. She's a bad girl. So we did Turn the Corner. Honestly, I did not know what Turn the Corner was going to do, but I no longer had any expectation. And by that time, we had founded Sablatha Music. And I had come to the realization that I just do me. I put on my own events.
Create a platform.
Right, create my
for
own
other
platform.
artists to-
And a platform for other artists, yes. And I won't worry about who invites me to do what. I think with Turn the Corner, we only did one church gig with that, and that was the white church, Flipside. And it was 12 people there, and half of them came with us. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna worry about the church. I'm just gonna do this music wherever. And so I did it wherever. And that music, that was a banging album. But after that, I was kind of out of it. I just didn't see where any of it was going.
It's kind of like how last week we were talking about creating our own spaces in other people's space. It was like you were working for so long to have somebody put a seat for you at the table. Yeah. And by the time you got to you know what, I'm going to bring my own seat. I'm going to bring my own table. Right. I'm going to create my own space in your space. You retired. Yeah,
I was exhausted. And by now we've started the Christmas experience. The Christmas experience was, I don't know, 3 years in, but maybe at the time, maybe 4. And it was an annual event that was a big deal in the Inland Empire. It was cool. And I went back to the roots of helping other people. Let me help some other people by giving them a platform that they otherwise wouldn't get. And I didn't care what their genre was. I didn't care what their style was. I found more joy in that than I did in anything else.
It's another gift that you have. It's in your wheelhouse to facilitate.
I love facilitating and helping people. I do see. One of the things that happened when my mom said, you're always helping everybody else with their dream. When are you gonna, that had a positive and a negative impact on me, because for a while it made me turn that faucet off to helping other people. But that's naturally who I am. And so once I turned that faucet back on, I was like, all right, cool. Let's mentor, like mentoring Caleb Lombard. Shout out to the great Caleb Lombard, that young MC. It felt good to give him a platform. It felt good to mentor him, help him get his first studio set up. That to me, all of those experiences have been far more gratifying to me than any of the records I put out.
It's so powerful.
Well, I mean, and then I figured out a way, to entrepreneurialize it.
Yes.
We put out music for Leilani Jones. Shout out to Leilani Jones.
Yes.
We put out an album for Charles Dorsey. Shout out to Dr. Charles Dorsey. We put out the first project we put out was for Allegra Parks. Shout out to Allegra Parks. That was a bad album. Allegra Parks album, that was a beautiful album. So we found ways to enterprise it and make money. It was really, that was a cool experience during that thing that we were doing. But in here and way back in here, I still wanted to be the guy. And so Milan, Mom and I went to the Grove Theater to see Music Soul Child.
I like him. I know you don't, but
Let your daddy just say I acted an ass. We were given the tickets too. We were like third row. We were right there.
Yo, you've been one of them ungrateful niggas.
You know what? And see again, because I don't often talk about where I'm at. Sometimes it comes out when I least expect it.
Right,
And I didn't expect to have the reaction I had when we got there. I was excited that we had the tickets. Me and my wife gonna go out, have a good time, and I knew there was good seats. It didn't sound like that when that nigga was singing it. So I was like, this nigga can't sing.
OMG.
So you crashed out at the
Girl.
concert.
Oh my God, I
I was
crashed.
like, let's just leave.
I crashed all the way out.
tier
Let's
crash
just
out.
go.
I crashed all the way out. It was disrespectful. I
I'm ready
ruined
to
the
go.
evening for Mika. It was, but
It
but
was
it
a
was
night out. We like live music. We like being out in the mix. But I get now, where he was and the space he was in. Doesn't excuse it.
no,
but
it was disrespectful. And
But
the
it
crazy
lends
thing is,
context. It lends context.
yeah, the crazy thing is he has some songs that I've always loved, but I've never been a big fan of his voice. And to hear him live, he was terrible. And I was like, I mean, like going back in time a bit. So when I'm jumping around trying to make this music happen, this was during the time when before I put Soul Pleasure out, me and a former friend who I won't name, but he was my boy back then, but we shall not name him now. We were doing stuff at Motown Live. Motown Live was a TV show that was featuring urban artists. This is when Faith Evans was popping, Montel Jordan. Montel Jordan was the host of the show. All the big R&B artists were like on this platform. And it was like almost like a Soul Train type thing, but not, it wasn't focused on dancing. It was a crowd and the person would be up there doing their performing or whatever. Ricky Minor and them guys was playing Paul Jackson Jr. Shout out to Paul Jackson Jr. That's my guy. And who was playing keys? Wayne Lindsay. Shout out to Wayne Lindsay. I used to do his wife's or his ex-wife's hair. What's her name? We went and saw her too. Lynn Fidmont. Shout out to Lynn Fidmont. Yeah, I used to do her hair. But we would go and we had like it was like a TV show that we were trying to do through cable. Yeah, like we would interview people, we interview artists and comedians. We did a show on Shang, the comedian. Shout out to Shang, that was the homie. And we got access to Motown Live. So every week we'd be there with our own camera and talking to people and all that. Well, Shang was the host, the MC off camera. So when the cameras weren't rolling, they had the crowd MC, that was Shang. And then when the cameras were rolling, Montel Jordan was the host. So Shang knew I could sing. So Shang would be like, is my boy SP in the crowd? Cap Clothing, AKA Cap LA, AKA Knowledge and Persistence. Established in 2018, Cap is a clothing company based out of the Los Angeles, California area. So we're at Motown Live, and Faith Evans is the artist that's performing. And they're in between takes with her stuff. They had done one song and then they were doing something. And so Shane comes back out to hype the crowd back up. And he says, SP, come on up, come up to the front of the stage. So I go up. Faith is on stage. They're playing her stuff. They're playing some of her music.
Mm-hmm.
It was some people consider this an industry no-no. I'm pure. It was not my intention to try to upstage anyone. They were playing music, so I started singing. I started singing her song, and she looked down, and she was like, "Hmm." And the crowd is going crazy. People, because I'm standing in the middle of the crowd, so they're going crazy. And Delroy Lindo was there. He was like, "You cold, brother?" I was like, "Oh man, shout out to Delroy Lindo." Um,
And we were fans. We would listen to Faith Evans.
yeah,
Like that.
Faith was like the refreshing R&B. She was my introduction back to
Yeah.
R&B. So after she does her set, I approach her backstage, and I said, "Hey, Faith, how you doing?" She said, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" She said, "You cold. You bad, brother." And I was like, "Thank you." I said, "So look, real talk, because everybody knows me. Know I'm not afraid to shoot my shot."
Shoot your shot.
I said, "Faith, real talk." Because by now I had already engaged Montel Jordan in some dialogue, and it was some fluff Hollywood dialogue. And I was like, okay, this nigga's on some fluff Hollywood stuff, whatever. Um, and which was funny to me because Montel Jordan can't sing. And I know I might catch some flack for that because we have mutual friends, but whatever. He can't sing. So this is how we do it.
But that I really feel
Dope
like
song,
that doesn't count
but
as singing.
no, you're right, it doesn't. Dope song, but in order for it to really be dope, you had to incorporate Slick Rick. That's why it was dope, because one of my favorite hip hop songs was the undergird of it, Children's Stories, which is your ringtone, Milan.
I don't even know the song.
Children's Stories, Slick Rick. Rick the Ruler,
Don't get me started.
presentation,
Don't get me
crumb. So anyway,
started. The
so
whole thing.
right, the whole song. So by now I have met several stars, Evander Holyfield, Shaka Khan. I've met all kind of people back at this show. So I said to Faith, I said, "Listen, Faith, I'm a fan, but I want to keep it real with you. And I need you to keep it real with me. Don't give me no Hollywood answer." Because she was very approachable. She was very, very down to earth. I said, "What do I have to do for me and you to do a song together?" And she said, "You know what? I'm going to keep it real with you. Because, first of all, you bad. And, when I'm in that crowd and just singing without any rules or restrictions, oh, I'm all over the place. I'm doing all kinds. I'm doing runs. I'm doing abstract notes. I'm doing everything. And I still had that Luther sound, but it's so many dimensions have been added to it that it's no longer a Luther sound." And she said, "But I'm gonna keep it 100 with you." She said, "My label's not gonna let me do anything with you." Now this is back when she was on Bad Boy Records, Diddy, no Diddy, and
The booty hole band.
oh no, oh no, no Diddy. Pause. See, you can't get young people no mic; they start saying crazy stuff. Um, she said, I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because you're not on a label." And she knew I wasn't on a label because nobody knew who I was. And it was a compliment that I appreciated, the fact that she said it that way, because essentially she's saying,
You're
as
free.
good as you are, you should be on a label, but I know that you're not because I've never heard of you.
Mhm.
So she said, "You're not on a label. They're not going to let me do anything with you until you're on a label. And then even then, it would depend on the circumstances." I was like, wow. She said, "But you know what? Be encouraged. We'll run into each other again because you're a bad boy." And that was one of the most touching moments I've ever had dealing with Hollywood. Matter of fact, that is the most, her and dealing with Randy Jackson, the two most endearing, transparent, down to earth moments I've ever had. Because at Motown Live, again, I met everybody. So at that time, Eric Benet and Halle Berry are dating. Now, Eric Benet got his record deal because of my cousin. My grandmother's sister's son helped him get his record deal. So Sammy, yep. Shout out to Sammy McKinney, who wrote "Just Because" for Anita Baker and a bunch of stuff for Patti LaBelle. He passed several years ago. That's my cousin, my second cousin, my mama's first cousin. Their mamas were sisters, and he never did anything to help me, but that's fine. But he helped Eric Benet, and Eric Benet was a pallbearer at his funeral.
Mm.
And so I knew that Eric Benet was going to be there because he was performing, and I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna run up on him and holla at him. And I had never met him before. I'd never seen him in action in terms of behind stage, so I didn't know what his temperament was. And when you're dealing with Hollywood people, you get a chance to know their temperament. And so I didn't know his. I hadn't seen him in action. I just seen him perform. So I was like, okay, let me see. He's gonna be backstage. We have all access. So me and my boy that's doing the show, we could be everywhere. Everywhere that the celebrities were, we were there. So Eric is coming in. Him and Halle Berry get out the limo, and we're back there where they are, where they pull him in and then take him to the green room, and they're holding hands, and he rushes her into the car. Now I had a direct connection to Halle Berry because my homeboy Nico, the hairstylist Nico, was her hairstylist, and Nico used to come sit at my feet, not literally but figuratively, and watch me do hair. Nico was my boy. We used to skate together, and when he was in beauty school, I would go and do some guest instruction and guest lecturing at his school because his instructor and I were friends. So that was my dude. And we went to the same church together at one time. Nico and I used to hang. Went to see Commission together at the fairgrounds and just hang. But I remember the day when he got the Halle Berry gig and he came back from Hawaii or somewhere and he showed me. I was one of the first people he showed in the book. He's like, man, look what I did. And he was so excited. I was so proud of him. And then, Nico was Nico. Nico became Hollywood. You heard it here. So at any rate, there's this concept that Mercer and I talked about in an episode called greatness adjacent, where you're walking with these people who are doing great things, but you're not a part of their great things, but they call you friend or homie or loved one. I don't get that. I don't get that the people who are directly next to you, who you say you rock with, but you don't help them. Heck, because I even called Nico one time, and I know I'm venturing off, but it all makes sense. I called Nico one time because Nico was doing, he was doing some stuff with the girl who's now married to Rodney Jerkins. And he introduced me to her at World on Wheels skating ring. And that girl could really sing. I think her name was Joy or something. But he was connected to some label people at LaFace Records. And so he was trying to plug me up with them. And Nico did do his job. He hooked me up, but nothing ever happened with it. So anyway, I'm thinking I'll get a chance to talk to both of them because I have a connection to both of them. I have a connection to Halle Berry. I have a connection to Eric Benet. But he wished her in that back room so quick, you'd have thought there was paparazzi back there. And there was nobody because you had to be of a certain official status to even be in this area. And so I was like, man, they rushed off quick. And then he never came out. So I had to wait until after this nigga got done performing and just catch him because my mind now, I'm like, he gonna run back as fast as he ran out. So sure enough, he gets done performing and he darts out and I say, hey, Eric. He's like, hey, what's happening, brother? I said, hey, man, listen. Sammy, that's my cousin. He said, Sammy. I said, Sammy McKinney. He said, oh, yeah. He said, oh, yeah. Tell Sammy I said hello. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he was gone. And I was like, that was abrupt. It's like, okay, that's whatever.
Y'all
I get it.
Literally out here living out Hairspray to be on the show that they had on Hairspray,
Mhm.
but every day was Negro Day.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, all right, that's all right. I don't even know what to do with that, so I won't sweat it right now. I'll deal with that later. The next week, Brian McKnight is there. Now, Kennard had done some computer work for Brian McKnight. So I figured I would holler at him. And I had Brian McKnight and I have mutual friends because Brian McKnight grew up Seventh-day Adventist. And I had a whole cluster of clients at one time that were all Seventh-day Adventists. And so they all knew each other very well. He and his brother Claude and Mark Kimball and Kibble and Joey Kibble and all of them. Shout out to Take Six. They knew all of them, and they were good. The clients were good friends of mine, and so I was like, and they would always say, "Hey, we should hook you up with Mark Kibble and all that." I was like, "No, I'm good," you know, because at the time I wasn't really trying to do music. So fast forward, now I'm in this scene, and I'm like, okay, I'm about to try to connect with everybody. So Brian McKnight comes. Now I'd already heard things about Brian McKnight from other friends who are in the industry, but I didn't sweat it. It was like whatever. So I'm walking over to him, and we're in this back area again, this like street, but right behind the building, but outside where only VIPs could be. And he goes, "Hey, what's up, boy?" And I'm looking like, who is he talking to? And he walks up to me, gives me the dap, the whole man hug thing. "Oh, what's going on, man? What's happening?" And I'm like, "Hey, what's up, man? What's up?" And we start chopping it up, and I'm like, Brian thinks I'm somebody that I'm not. So I don't live in that lane. I'm not gonna be a false identity dude. So I said, "Hey man, my boy Kennard hooked up your computer, man. Have you heard him play the guitar?" I'm trying to gas up Kennard. And he was like, and that's when it triggered. I don't know this nigga. And when I tell you, this nigga Brian McKnight was so damn rude in that split moment. When I said what I said about my friend to him, and he realized that he did not know me, that I wasn't who he thought I was, there were some people walking up in mid-sentence, and I'm saying, "Yeah, man, my boy Kennard did your computer, and man, you should hear that boy play and produce, man. He's tight." He's like, "Hey, what's up? What's going on?" He started talking to somebody else that walked by. They weren't even walking up to him. They were walking by, and he interrupted my conversation to detour to some people who wasn't even paying him no attention. And I stood there for a minute. Let me tell you what I thought. Because your daddy, I'm a peaceful man.
But he don't
And I'm a
like to
real
be disrespected.
I'm a real nigga. And I stood there for a second, and I had to think about what I wanted to do and what it would cost. Because I wanted to slap the hell out of him. I was like
Will Smith, Chris Rock slap? Or like,
nah, because see, no, because the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap was a choreographed slap on Will's end, not on Chris's end. Chris didn't know he was gonna get slapped. But no, a real nigga, I will slap life out of you. I wanted to slap the taste out of his mouth. Because I was standing there, and what I did was I'm standing there while he starts off into this conversation with these other people, and I'm waiting. I'm not moving because I'm thinking I'm gonna give him a chance. Now I'd already heard stuff about him from several people, but I'm gonna give him a chance to redeem this moment by when he's done with this, he'll turn back to me and we'll finish the conversation because now at least he knows we have somebody in common.
Right.
That nigga didn't do that. He got done saying what he needed to say to them people and walked away. He didn't even say, "All right, brother," nothing. And my boy was in the background watching that happen. And he said, "SP, you look like you was about to take off on that nigga." I said, "I was." But I thought about what it would cost us. Because that was the most disrespectful thing I'd ever experienced from somebody like that. And I was like, okay. And so those are the types of things. I mean, I met Chaka Khan, but my friend and former hair client sang for Chaka Khan. Shout out to Lisa Vaughn. Lisa Vaughn is my homegirl. She sang for Chaka Khan, for Diana Ross, for Natalie Cole. She's just dope. And she sang for me. She used to sing in my group for a little bit. She introduced me to Chaka Khan. And she was trying to hook me up with everybody back there. And I was like, "Oh, no. I ain't got to meet all these people." But it was just an interesting experience. Now, I was going back in time with that. To say that I've been around all these people and connected with all these people, but never seemed to be able to break through what they call the glass ceiling. So by the time I put out Turn the Corner, I was just putting music out because I thought the music needed to be out. I wasn't focused on anything in particular. I had given up the whole vision of trying to be an artist or trying to be a star or trying to get discovered. I was getting older. I had kids. By the time I put Turn the Corner out, um, shoot, Blake wasn't born yet, but he was coming along. And, you know,
Not coming along. No.
pause.
No.
You slow. And so, you know, I just I started thinking more about how I could pour into other people. And we talked about this off camera. You know, there were a lot of artists that I helped. And I'm proud of that. You know, I
should be.
shouted a lot of them out, but there are a lot of artists that I sold into, helped them get, you know, their first album launched. There are some artists that I, you know, never wanted to work with again. I even did I produced half of a soundtrack for a stage play. That was an interesting experience. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. But some good songs though, some good music, good singers, good writers. It was cool.
You did some feature work on other people's projects.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you know, I said earlier that 𝐃𝐨𝐧'𝐭 was my sax player in my band after I put Soul Pleasure out. Fast forward years later, and I would get a call because in that time frame, I put on a lot of events, and 𝐾Massey was always there playing with me. Thundercat was with me early on, but 𝐾Massey played with me for the years. He was featured on a couple of songs on Soul Pleasure, and you know, just a great journey. I ended up doing a lot of music with him. I'm on a lot of his albums in his choir sound, but he featured me on a song. He featured me on 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷𝐻𝐿, which was a bonus CD that was on, I want to say, Heaven and Earth, that album. I didn't even know that the song made the album because somebody else told me it made them. I assumed that it didn't. I didn't know he had this bonus album within the album. And then I learned that 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐷𝐻𝐿 was on there and I was featured, but I wasn't listed as a feature. 𝐾𝐿,
Shady Boots business.
we're gonna talk about that one day, 𝐾𝐿, again, because we've talked about it, but we're gonna talk about it some more. Because I'm still feeling it's a little raw. But he's still my guy. I love him to death. He's a great guy. And Thundercat, every time we see each other, we just embrace like it was yesterday. I've had the opportunity now to perform at the Hollywood Bowl, to perform
Coachella.
I did, but I didn't end up doing the Coachella gig. My back went out. My back went out the week before the gig, so I didn't do the gig. And that was terrible too. My back went out while I was at rehearsal with 𝐾𝐿 the week before the gig, and I couldn't eat, or days before the gig actually, and we were doing 2 weekends in a row. I couldn't even walk. I didn't do hair for a week. I couldn't barely stand up. That was terrible. But
You also performed at Disney Hall?
yeah, I was on Disney Hall, Walt
Yeah.
Disney Hall. Man, that was an experience. That place was amazing. Nokia Theater. Just I've had the great opportunity to perform at some places. I performed at the Wilshire E. Bell. You know, I used to always go to the plays there and be like sitting in the audience. So I talked about this in the last episode where I met Fred Hammond and had this weird journey with him and got hip to 𝐷awkins and 𝐷awkins. Well, I was drawn to 𝐷awkins and 𝐷awkins music because for me, their music was the only gospel music that resonated with my urban vibe. And they were truly standalones. Commission was urban, but Commission was still, they weren't churchy, but they were like a hybrid. But 𝐷awkins and 𝐷awkins was like straight up like a Christian H-Town or Silk or one of them groups. And so I'm at a stage play at Wilshire E. Bell. And Eric 𝐷awkins is one of the brothers. He's in the play. And this boy's killing. The boy got a bad voice. He can sing. Him and his brother both. Shout out to Eric and Anson 𝐷awkins. They some cold brothers. And I'm I'm looking to connect still, just to connect.
Mhm.
So I walk up to anybody and talk to them and shoot my shot or whatever. So Eric is in the crowd after the play is over. And at that moment, Dawkins weren't stars. If you weren't involved in the church, you wouldn't even know who they were. You'd have to be a real urban gospel or commission connected
Mhm.
historian to know who Dawkins was. But I was that person. So I was like, oh, this is Eric. I'm gonna walk up to him and talk to him. It's just I wasn't trying to get connected. I just wanted to meet him and see what his hair's at.
Mhm.
And when I walked up to him and introduced myself to him, he was rude. He was rude, blew me off. And again, I'm that guy who inside I'm going,
Weighing the options.
nigga. And so the coolest thing happened. Fast forward years later, Blake is at a session doing some music work, and who walks in? Because I did an album, and on the album, one of the songs that we did was called "Dream Again" with
Marla.
Marla Blair Jones.
Mhm.
Shout out to Marla Blair Jones.
Beautiful voice.
Oh my God, that girl could sing. And
Mhm.
she and Eric's wife are best friends. So and I know this at the time, and I'm good friends with Eric's godbrother because he played Bruce Briggs. Shout out to Bruce Briggs, who's married to Dorian from Kirk Franklin. Just connected to all these people. She sings with Kirk Franklin, and it might be Darian. And D. I'm sorry if I keep messing your name up. I know it's D. I call her D all the time. Well, I had just been on the phone with Bruce, so I'm sitting in this waiting area. Blake is off doing his thing, and Eric walks in with his wife and his son. And I'm like, oh, well, look at here. It's Eric Dawkins. Now I haven't seen him in years. It's been decade or so, maybe two. But me being me, I said, hey, what's up, Eric? And he said, hey, how you doing, man? I said, we've met before. I said, but you and I have a very good friend in common. And I dropped Bruce's name. He's like, oh, hey, what's up? Oh, okay. I say, so I got Bruce on the phone. I was like, Bruce, I'm sitting here with your boy Eric. And he's like, oh man. And so we start talking, and then Eric and I start a full-on conversation. He was very, very cordial. We had a full-on conversation. And I shared with him that moment we met
Mhm.
and how he treated me. And he apologized. And he said, man, I'm sorry, man. He said, back then we was all over the place. We was in our own heads about stuff, and it was just a crazy time. He said, but I apologize. And so since then, every time I see him now, hey, what's up, boy? What's going on? Because he goes to church with my writing partner, where my writing partner goes, and Marla's at one of the worship leaders there, and at Hope's House. Shout out to Hope's House in where they at? Granada Hills, or
Mhm.
yeah, that's a pretty cool church. Some good word there. And so we're cool, but I've run into all these different people and been looking for peer validation. You don't have to help me. I've always wanted them to see me. And now I don't need it. I'm satisfied doing whatever it is that I do. If it's putting a song out just because, even though Marcus Cole, shout out to Marcus Cole from Commission told me, man, you can't just be putting music out just to put it out. You got to have a purpose and you got to have a plan. And I do agree with that. Because I told him, I said, look, man, I just want to put this song out that I got. I want you to get on it. He said, well, what are you doing with it? What's the plan? I was like, well, I don't know. Just put it out and, let it do what it does. He said, man, 200,000 songs get released every week. You can't just put it out and see what it do. It won't go nowhere. If it don't get on the algorithm, nobody will ever hear it. He says, you got to have a plan. You got to connect it to something. I was like, okay, all right, you preaching. I received that.
So help me connect it to something.
Yo, so, yeah, well, that part.
I digress.
That part, that's my wife right there. That's personal. People are still people. I get it. The song is a bad song. We're gonna do something with it. Me and my boy 𝐸𝐻𝐾 Brown. Shout out to 𝐸𝐻𝐾 Brown. We got an episode coming out that's gonna be hot. And my boy Taylor Graves. Shout out to Taylor Graves and the Graves brothers. You talking about some talented boys. Grammy Award winning Taylor Graves is a good friend of mine. We've done a song together. He's gonna get on this song with us, and we're gonna flip it a little bit. We're gonna put a little something on it. I'm not even gonna talk about what the name of the song is yet.
Okay, don't
But
do it.
yeah, we're
Don't do it.
getting ready to work on a song that's gonna be fire. And you know, for me, I will continue to say, let it do what it does. But I received what Marcus said when he said, be intentional. You know, he told me, he said, stop telling people you're not an artist. Stop doing that.
Word.
Taylor said the same thing. He just said it nicer. Taylor said, no, man, you will always be an artist.
Word.
You're just not a touring artist right now.
Word.
Okay. I mean, and if somebody called me and want me to do a gig, I'll do it. But I'm not a touring artist. I'm not trying to run around doing shows all over the place. That's not where my life is right now. But if the money's right, I'll do it for the money.
Make sure
Got
you
to
put the
get the
dollar signs.
monies.
Make sure you put the dollar signs on the screen, the money bag.
Right. So yeah. So this journey has been interesting. Being so close, being in such tight-knit spaces of greatness adjacents, yet not, you know, they talk about 6 degrees of separation. I've got 1 and 2 degrees of separation from some of the most powerful music people in the world. And you wouldn't know it. And that's crazy to me. But sitting down with Merce helped me to see that I'm not unique. I'm not special in that category. Even the great Merce said the same thing. And he's dropping names that are humongous. People that he's done work with, people that he's helped. Some of the biggest stars in the world.
That he gave an opportunity.
Gave opportunities for, created stuff on his paid dues platform. And if he can't get no love, then I know I ain't gonna get none. Because I pay you $150 to come play sax or bass or whatever for a concert. But he, you know.
Hey, I'm not comparing you to Jesus or nothing like that, but they.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel you. The scripture says that a prophet is without honor in his own home. So I get it. And it's softened the wounds, or not softened them. It's softened the blows and has healed some of the wounds over the years. Would I have liked to have been where Bobby Brown was? Absolutely. But I wouldn't want to have been a crackhead.
That part.
I mean, and I'm not saying I would have been, because, you know, drugs was not my thing. But there were some things that were my things. And when you get put in a world where it's given to you 24 hours a day without any recoil or recourse, and they're giving it to you because you're the it guy, it's hard to say no to what you're drawn to. And so I find myself more often saying, thank you, Lord, that you did not open doors that I begged you to open. You know, after I went to that last record label, I was just like, all right, I quit. I talked about in the last episode about how I went to Motown and how that whole thing was just like demoralizing. I was like, man, okay, this is crazy, you know, because in my mind, I'm listening to Boyz II Men, and I'm like, I can out-sing all of these guys. What's going on? But it's like, but if the track that you turn in don't sound like you can out-sing them all, then in that moment you can't out-sing them.
Right.
So, you know, but it's been, to this point, it's been a really dope journey of discovery. I have found myself. And if this is how long it took me to find myself, I'm okay with that. I know where I fit in vocally. I fit in wherever I deem myself to be. If I want to go sing at the church, I can go do that. And every time I do that, they love it. If I want to go sing in a club, I can do that. And they love it.
Yeah, you can set your own stage for your own show.
Right. Which I've
anytime you
done
want
100
to.
times.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay,
Successfully. Yes.
I needed to go through all of these closed, boarded up doors and windows to discover what you need. You already got. It's in house, and continue to do what you do. You know, right now, obviously, I'm not in the season for it, but that season is coming back. I can sense it. I can see it. I'm feeling myself being pulled back towards the music scene, and there's so many things I want to still do, and there's people that I still want to work with that I haven't worked with, and some that I've worked with that I want to work with again. And there are people that receive me. They show me love. My boy Taylor Graves, him and 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭, they blessed my soul with the things they said to me about me. And I was like, man, okay, because that's what you need to have. You know, my scripture, Amos, how can two walk together unless they be in agreement? I believe it's Amos 3:9 or 9:3. That's the most important thing that I've learned. You know, you can't rock with everybody because everybody ain't rocking with you. They're there in your space. They're trying to be greatness adjacent because they see you and see that you got something. So this journey of music has been interesting. I have put out, let's see, 6 albums, maybe 7. I've produced hundreds of songs
You still got a whole
for
lot of
myself and other
stuff.
people. I got a
Okay.
vault full of music right now that I haven't released that I've been sitting on for 3 or 4 years. Because during COVID, I was cranking it out. I was cranking music out. I was deep into music for a minute during COVID until I shifted over to the book. But I've got music still in me. I'm excited to see what me and Blake can do together because that little nigga's incredible. So I guess I should stop calling him nigga because I told him that he's not a YN. I showed him a video on Instagram. Said, you're not a YN. So stop calling yourself a YN. And for those of you who don't know what a YN is, that's a young nigga. So that little nigga is not a young nigga.
He's just a little brown boy.
Little cocoa brown boy. And he ain't little, and he ain't much of a boy no more either.
No, that's a whole nother show. At any rate, he's not a boy.
Mom, boy is a white racist word.
Good times.
So you said at any rate, you got something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't even remember what we were watching. I think it was an Instagram post or a YouTube video, and you and I were sitting talking, and what the person on I don't know, I think it was just a video of somebody trying to encourage people, right? It was a guy, I don't even remember what his name was, but what he said resonated with both of us. And he talked about making sure that you don't take the
So don't leave anything in you.
Yeah, you don't leave anything in you. Get it all out. Don't die with it.
Die empty.
Die empty.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Die empty.
Yeah. I embrace that. I think the challenge had been, not has been, but had been, I was focused on a particular thing. Even with 𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐧'𝐭, right? 𝐾𝐾𝐨𝐬𝐧'𝐭 said to me when we did his first, well, technically his second album, because his first album was like this gospel tribute to his grandfather. It was a really neat album, but I don't think there were really any vocals involved with that. But when he started his real journey, he said to me after we finished the first album, he said, man, because for most of my life, I've sang in a higher register. I've sang in an alto register with what I did, but my voice has gotten deeper over the years, and I've lost the singing range that I used to have because I don't sing as much. So my baritone voice has really developed where I can hit these really low notes. And so he said, man,
it's rich.
Man, you're going to get so much session work. SP, because he still calls me SP. He's like, SP, you're gonna get so much session work, man, from that baritone. People gonna be like, who's on that baritone? And that never happened.
Mhm.
But what it did was it sparked in me, okay, maybe this is your moment. Maybe you're gonna get your calls now, and then you can parlay it into something and
Mhm.
make it become something. Now you can present yourself. And it never happened. So all these little moments, I would latch on to them as, oh, I've got a bite. You know, I need to set this hook so I can reel this big thing in. And it never happened. So when we did the feature on that song, I was thinking, all right, even though Kamasi's audience is not technically my audience,
Mhm.
Kamasi is so widespread with
Mhm.
his style and influence
Mhm.
that, I mean, the dinner party and all that, I could be on all of that stuff that they doing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, this feature is gonna be dope because this is gonna launch me. Because by the time he did that album, he was like taken all the way off. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is gonna be dope. And then my name doesn't get listed. I'm like, oh, come on. So it's like you get close, and after a while, I had to let it go.
Mhm.
And once I began to let it go, I started to feel better about me. Because when you're trying to do something that you seem to keep getting rejected for, it's almost impossible to not hear the voice that says, I told you so. Told you wasn't good enough. Don't nobody want you. And so to reject that voice, I had to reconcile the fact I don't belong here. I belong here. So wherever that is, wherever God takes me, that's where I'll go. And I gave up the desire, and I literally gave up the desire to be famous. Now, I gave up the pursuit of being famous. If an opportunity came right now for me to make a hit and be on something, I would do it. You know, but I'm not chasing it anymore. I'm
Right.
not
It's
trying
like
to.
it's like you were too focused on the window that you kept missing the elevator that was going. Even if that
That's a
elevator
good
was going to
analogy.
go down,
Yeah,
you were still missing the movement because you were stuck looking out the window at things that you weren't getting to, or you weren't able to grab them because you can't reach through a window. And if you can, we got to have a whole different conversation.
if it's open.
Closed
No,
windows. Let me
that's good
specify.
though,
Closed
Milan.
windows.
That's good. It would feel like that, and the fact that to draw off of your analogy, looking over at taking my focus off the window and focusing on the elevator, because yes, the elevator does signify up and down. I don't want to look at that. The window and the door signify I'm going through to the next thing. So I'm I understand it now. And I'm okay with it. I'm good with it. I'm not unique in it. There are millions of people who are not where they thought they should be, or are not where they thought they should be based on who is where they are. So when you do look at the Bobby Browns of the world or whoever else, and you go, I'm better than him, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's, back in the day, so back, this is fun. Back in the 80s, when me and my friend Baxter, Baxter McCrary, that's my boy, we grew up together, went to middle school together, was friends all through high school, was roommates as young adults. Baxter, shout out to Baxter McCrary. Baxter was producer slash DJ for the group, the College Boys. Rome, who's been in all the movies, Think Like a Man, Think Like a Man 2, what's the show he was on? Like Us, or not Like Us, but the other one,
A million little things.
Million Little Things. He was the lead rapper in that group, and they used to practice in me and Baxter's living room. So Baxter and I had an old school answer machine, and this was at the time that Bobby was gone from New Edition, and Johnny Gill had replaced him. And they came out with Growing Up Can Be a Pain. Man, that song was cold. So me and Baxter was like,
Song's called Boys to Men.
yes, it is. These are the things that turn boys to men. So we rewrote the song and I recorded it on our answering machine. I'm gonna do it in a lower register because my voice ain't what it used to be in terms of range. Hello, you've reached Baxter and Steve. We're not home, but a message you can leave. So at the tone, just leave it all. And we'll do it all that we have to do to give right back to you. People used to call our phone every single day. I didn't want nothing. I just wanted to hear the message. Bye. It was like, so that was pure. But in those moments, everybody that would hear it would say the same thing. Why you don't have a record deal? Everybody that would hear me sing would say that. So when you hear enough people say that, you go, and they're the people who are consuming the music that's out. So they're hearing what's out.
Right.
They're like, wait a minute, why you don't have no record deal? It's like, but after all of the air deflates from those balloons, you have to deal with real life. I'm not the only person that people have said that to. They've said that to more people than the people who actually have record deals. Record industry says we're going to take one person and turn them into a star over 1,000 people that are better than them. And so,
Right. Because then they have leverage. They be like, we can replace you. This person down the street can sing a whole lot better than you, so you better get in line.
Well, I mean, not just that we can replace you, we can shape you. We can make you into what we want you to be. Yeah. And I know a lot of artists whose names I will not drop, or shout out, who were crafted into what they are now, because that's not really who they were. And I get it, because I went through a myriad of changes trying to figure out how to fit. All I was ever trying to do was just fit in the church. And I was like, I just want to fit in the church. The only place that I found peace and comfort as a singer in the church was when I was leading worship. Because leading worship ain't about me. I wasn't a performer. We got a lot of worship people now that are worship performers. The band is a performer. The 5 or 6 singers they got up there, they're all performers. There's no pure, authentic worship. They ain't touched God's hymn, let alone his heart. Because all that stuff is performative. They got all the lights and all the stuff, and that stuff is cool. There's nothing wrong with having it, but they've put so much emphasis and energy into the presentation that they have forgotten about the purpose. And when the songs are done, they sit down, and then sometimes they'll work themselves up into some contrived worship experience, and when that's over, it's over. And we never did experience God. Well, I wasn't that kind of worship singer, because I knew that my worship was not about how good I could sing. Commission has a song called When Jesus Sings. And it talks about the day he sang, it was so clear, a sound that was so clear I'd never heard before. Can you imagine what it would sound like if Jesus broke out in song? Our ears wouldn't even be able to handle that, because he's the one that gave us these gifts. How much better is his singing voice? We wouldn't even be able to contain his singing voice in the earth realm. So when I think about worship, I don't think about how good I can sing or what notes I can hit and what runs I can do, because none of that stuff impresses him. That's for us to impress one another. And there's nothing wrong with that when you're entertaining people, but when it's all of him, it's like, man, I could sing with no runs and bad notes and have a heart for him and lead people into worship. That was the only place where I found real purpose within the church. Outside of that, I'm like, y'all locked into a particular style and type that you gotta have.
Conditioned.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Especially the black church.
Right.
Now the white church, I could go to the white church and sing all day long. Matter of fact, we went and did, when we put Allegra Park's album out, we went to a white church in San Juan Capistrano Shout out to Sandra Stevens for hooking that up. And my God, we we sold so much product. Those people loved us because they just love good singing. They don't have to attach it to any emotion or anything. It was like, wow, okay. But they were different. And some of the music that I would want to do, they would still be looking like, what's this? So this journey has been cool. This journey has been and is still very interesting. Um, we were talking off camera about any kind of message that I would have for people, that it's really summed up in that thing, die empty. Because even though Marcus Cole told me that, we got to have a plan, I would dare say, even if you don't have a plan, put it out anyway. Get it out of you. If it touches one person,
Yeah.
if it inspires one person, you did your job. Because the gifts of music and other gifts that we have, they were meant to be shared.
Yep.
So my journey is a journey, music-wise, of sharing. And I've always been excited about that. I look forward to my friend and sister friend, Valerie Singleton Evans, because we're gonna do some music with her this summer. And I'm looking forward to working with her because she has a beautiful voice, but she really has a pure heart of worship.
Yeah.
That we experienced not too long ago. It was like, whoo, she moved me. So I was like, all right, here we go, let's go. But yeah, let's just die empty. Yeah, that's a good segue to wrap it up. So hey, look, I thank my girls. I thank my wife Mika, my daughter Milan, for being the invisible partners, but the heard, not unheard, just the unseen partners for this episode. And my music journey to this point has been quite a roller coaster, and I'm looking forward to continuing to ride until there's no ride left. Milan, I know you wanted to ask me something about the Jerry curl.
Okay, so
Now's your chance.
Okay, so
I did not forget.
so you had mentioned that somebody had a Jerry curl.
Yo, 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 yo. Lay down, dog. You're dead. Shout out to Lee Mack.
Johnny the Pimp. He had a Jerry curl, but you said it was kind of like stuck at the same length. It wasn't growing.
Yeah, well, it didn't seem like
It was just
growing.
it was just every time you saw it, no matter how many weeks, how many months it was at the same length. So was a Jerry curl, and again, don't roast me in the comments, y'all. I was born in 2000. Like,
you were
don't
very
crash
past the
out
Jerry
on me.
curl.
Like I'm trying. Okay, I'm trying. Was the Jerry curl supposed to grow your hair? Because I thought it was just supposed to be a look.
Well, the Jerry curl had the propensity to grow hair, because of how the scalp was being stimulated by the chemicals. However, it was chemical based. So anything that's chemically based can do one or two things. It can help, it can hurt, or it can help and hurt. So while the Jerry curl, for a lot of people, a lot of brothers and sisters, had their hair growing long, hair down their back. When I had a curl that was on my shoulders. Matter of fact, when I was in high school, they told me I had to cut it because my hair was on my shoulders. I pinned it up, and they were like, "No, you can't do that." I'm like, how do you know it's not cut? We see the pin. I'm like, just anal.
So your pin game was weak.
So my pin game was whack. But some people, the Jerry curl didn't help them like that. Their hair would not grow. It would stay the same length. And I just swear that Johnny's hair just seemed to always be the same length. And he kind of tried to have it like tapered on the sides, because by that time we were wearing tapered hair. Even if you were wearing a curl still, I wasn't, but if you were wearing a curl still, it was tapered on the sides. It's kind of like a flat top, but texturized. His just it never
had no movement.
Yeah, it was like, what's wrong with his curl?
I got two tidbits, because I dibbled and dabbled a little bit. I'm a little bit younger than you are.
Yeah, but
Just a tad.
but you're connected to my genre and my time.
I am. So I remember, like, I didn't experience the curl as a hairstylist. more than as a consumer. My mother would never let me get one. I didn't even know what type of hair I had. I didn't need one.
Nope.
At any rate, I think in my mind, like the Jerry curl was somewhat, it was a harsh chemical, but it was somewhat of like what we call a protective style now, which protective styles kind of allow your hair to get a break from being processed by like styling tools and everything, because you kind of just got a curl and left it alone until it was time for your retouch.
Yeah, you spray it every day and
Yeah,
you go on about your business.
Except
for when you went swimming.
You wouldn't comb it. Oh, that's a whole nother.
Good Fred oil, stay soft roll, and snap back in that order.
It was a mess, literally. At any rate,
I'll talk about that when I do the hair episode.
So protective in that you didn't do a whole lot of manipulating of your hair when you had a curl. Like you didn't want to pull it in a ponytail. You wanted the curl to maintain, or you wanted your hair to maintain the curl. So you weren't pulling it. So you were leaving it alone. So it allowed your hair to grow because you weren't
Just
in
let
it
your
trying
soul
to do
glow.
different things to it.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, but because hair would grow, but it was also like a double process. It was a chemical. So you had to straighten the hair and then put another chemical in to recurl
make the curls,
to
shape the curls
in the way that you need them
to lock them in.
It was very, very hard.
It's harsh. It was harsh.
How long did that take?
Yeah.
Okay. So
depends.
when I first started getting curls when I was in 6th grade, and in the 6th grade. In the 6th grade, it would take
70s. It was the
Early
70s.
Yeah, it was the 70s. Yeah,
late 70s.
I was 79. It was 79.
Yeah.
In the 6th grade, it would take 3-4 hours.
No, that's a whole braid day.
5 hours.
No,
And a hairstylist would be doing multiple curls at once, so they'd have a bunch of people in there getting them.
Y'all just like in the movies, just sat across the windowsill with your shower caps.
Yeah, and it stank. The chemicals.
It smelled like sulfur.
Yeah, the chemical was foul. So you'd have a whole salon just ringing. Just every time I would do one, Mika would be like, she'd come out of the room like, well, I'm about to go. Because by the time she and I were working together, I was doing curls. She wasn't. I had 2 clients that wore curls, but they wore them in a very modern look. So you didn't know that they didn't look like Jerry curls. But the curl was a blessing and a curse. It was. The worst part of it was when you wanted to go swimming.
But my theory about Johnny, that's his name?
Johnny the Pimp.
Okay. Pimp and trainer.
Right.
Was that perhaps Johnny was doing a little bit too much manipulating, because your hair is still going to continue to grow. It grows. Johnny's hair was just breaking off. So it gave the illusion that his hair was not growing.
Well, see, okay, so that's one theory, but the other theory is from a scientific perspective. The average person's hair grows at a rate of a 1/2 inch per month. That's the average, no matter what ethnicity they are. But that means that there's ranges there on both ends. So while some people's hair grows longer in a month, some grows shorter. Johnny was probably one of those whose hair grew it just didn't grow very fast.
Yeah.
He was given that 0.02.
Right, millimeters. We're talking millimeters, not centimeters, millimeters. And his curls would, see, here's the other thing. The shorter the curl,
the tighter.
No, the shorter the curl, the less, or the shorter the hair, the less room there is to make full curls, because you're putting the hair on rods to make the curl. So if your hair is only this long, you have to use the smallest rods to make your curl, but that makes the curls really, really tight and small. They don't look like body waves and curls. Because most people like me Well, most people, okay, so in the 80s, a lot of people wanted to look like El DeBarge and the DeBarge family because they all had, some of them had curls, but they didn't need curls. Some of them didn't have curls because all of them were biracial. And they had hair that was long and wavy and curly and all that. So when I would get a curl, because what they would do is they would tell you, when you get done with the curl, when the stylist finishes your hair, the girl that used to do my curls, her name was Candy in Compton. Candy would say, "Now, Steve, don't you comb that hair. Don't comb it for 3 days." Because again, like Mika said, you're locking the curl in. You need it to settle. I would ask for a comb. "What you doing?" And I would start combing the curls out.
Oh.
Because I didn't want tight curls. I wanted wavy hair that hung on my back. That's what everybody really wanted. All the guys wanted that wavy look. We didn't want the Michael Jackson curl look. We wanted the wavy look. The problem is, if your curl was short, you couldn't get the wavy look. If you was gonna get a curl, you had to use the smallest rods possible, and them curls was gonna be tight. But apparently, Johnny's stylist did not get that memo. So apparently they were using some rods that were bigger than they should have been using on Johnny's hair. So his hair had curls and straight ends sticking out. It was bad. It was bad.
It was giving Trey Young before Trey Young.
So it was bad. So yeah, the curl was revolutionary until it was time for two things. One, you got it wet, or you were ready to be done with it. And if you were ready to be done with it, there was really only one real way to escape it, and that was to cut it off. So you'd have to let it grow out, get enough new growth, and then cut it off.
Yeah, because
Or
you start blow drying hair that's double processed and trying to curl it.
Yeah, it will break
like
off.
Almost would just turn into mush.
Yeah, it will snap off. Now, I successfully transitioned one person out of a curl into a perm and hairstyle. But that was because she let me cut her hair short, and we worked it and worked our way out of it. But outside of that, most people didn't want their hair to be cut short. First of all, they had a curl because curl make your hair grow, So they didn't want, when they come out of the curl, they like, "I got this long hair, now let's press it out." And they're like, "Okay, we can do that today." But if you wear that for 2 weeks, your hair gonna start falling out because the chemicals that make the curl make your hair crave moisture. Hence the spray.
The daily spray.
Good Fred oil was the first.
Had to keep it moist.
Stay So Fro. World of Curls was the gel. And Snapback was the other gel.
And it never dried.
No, your hair stayed wet.
Yeah.
It's an illusion of moisture too. It's not real moisture. It's an illusion. All of those products,
let me get it.
yeah, all of those products were alcohol based, and Snapback was designed to do just that because there was a problem. If your curl got wet, like wet, not like it rained, but like you decided to go swimming, or you took a shower and your hair got wet, really wet, it would rinse all of the oil product off the hair and leave the hair dry. And when the hair got dry, it would ball up and crunch up and sometimes nap up, and you'd be like, "What happened to your curl?"
See, you need to visit. We're gonna have to have a movie night so you can watch.
What, Hollywood Shuffle?
Yeah.
I think that the curl needs to never come back.
Well, excuse me, it already has come back.
It's coming.
So what's happening now is kids with straight hair, Hispanic and Latino and white boys, are getting perms, which is a curl without the harsh breakdown chemical that black people needed. We were the only ones that needed the breakdown chemical to make our hair straight.
Straight first, and then go back in with that.
See,
with the neutralizer to lock in the curl. They don't need the straightener, the thio. So they just get it. You got a lot of them walking around, these young boys now walking around with curly hair. Their hair is not naturally curly.
Yeah, I was in the salon the other day, and this kid was he had to be like 11.
Right. So, but watch the trend. As the trend goes, And more people embrace the trend, because that's what happens with every trend, from bell bottoms to flat tops. Every trend, every culture looks to see how they can culturally appropriate it to them. When the curl came out, white boys were wearing curly perms. We were wearing Jerry curls. Now the curl is back out. White boys, Hispanic boys, and Asian boys are wearing curly perms. But the only way for us to really get it now, with the exception of the biracial kids, is that we're going to have to go back to getting it straightened and then get the curl put in there. And trust me when I tell you, it's coming. Because once you see enough young people wearing it, and once it gets put on the TV long enough, and it becomes the trend, because trends last about 5 to 7 years.
Right.
How long did skinny jeans last? They lasted a long time. But skinny jeans were out when I was a teenager. We just didn't call them skinny jeans. We called them taper leg. Same thing. So in order for it to happen, you're going to start seeing black boys coming to the shop.
So more bald-headed chickens.
Yes. Because here's the thing. The technology has not advanced. The product that it takes to make a black person's hair straight and then curly is the same product now that it was back then. And so that product still needs the same moisture, fake moisture now, that it needed when I was in the 6th grade. So you're going to start seeing black boys walking around with greasy drip.
And the three of us are in education of some sort.
𝐬𝐿.
𝐬𝐿, that's it.
All three of us are or have been in education at some point. We know that these kids don't take care of nothing, especially their hair. So it would be some little raggedy weave tumbleweeds.
So then, in full transparency, to amen what you just said, in the 6th grade,
did you have a weave tumbleweed?
I had a very so in the 6th and 7th grade, my curl was big. It wasn't until the 8th grade that I started combing it and making it wavy. But in the 6th and 7th grade, I had a big curl. There's a picture that my mom has of me with a big curl. And when I went to get my retouch done, get it done over, Candy was parting my hair. And she said, "Steve, what is this?" She pulled a, they used to have the keychains that were made out of BBs that were linked to each other. You know, ball bearings, little small metal balls. They're really small.
For like BB guns?
Yes, but they're chained together, and then there's one that has there's a little slit that's open, and then you pop the bead in there and pull it, and then you got a chain that's linked together. Those were keychains.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
One of those was in my hair.
Oh.
Deep down in my hair. My hair was long.
The whole thing? The whole chain?
Yeah.
Oh.
She was like, what is this? And I was in the mirror going, I don't know. How long has it been in here? I don't know. I didn't put it there. Somebody pranked me and put it there at some point. That's the only way it could have gotten there. And because, again, you did not want to wash your curl. The comeback from the washing of the curl or going in the pool was 3 days minimum, and it was not always successful. And if you did not do it successfully and do it right, your curl was never the same. One time I didn't do it right, my curl was jacked up until it was time to get another one. It was terrible. So we were paranoid about combing it. We were paranoid about wetting it. So you can only imagine, 6th and 7th grade, boys don't even wash their armpits like they should. So my hair was stinky and all of that, but it looked good because I kept it looking good. Like, "Hey, Steve, you want to go swimming?" No. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to go swimming. And you're like, all right, I'm gonna get in the pool, but I'm not gonna get my hair wet. I'm not doing that. No. So yeah, she pulled a keychain, BB linked keychain out of my hair, and I was like, wow, that's crazy.
See,
So
the kids nowadays, they don't even need anybody to prank them to put something in their hair because it's already gonna be.
So that's the science behind the curl. I don't know what Johnny's problem was, but his curl never got to such bounds where anyone could put anything in it because it just seemed to stay short and tight. And again, by that time, I was no longer wearing a curl. I stopped wearing a curl in my senior year of high school. And I had come out of curls twice and gone back to them in that time frame from the 6th grade to my senior year. I had cut it all off 2 different occasions and started over and got another curl. But after my matter of fact, by the time I started my senior year, I cut the curl off like the first month of school and transitioned over into a texturizer. And after that, my hair was so bomb as a texturizer that people used to think I had a curl and I did not, because I didn't even know that I had the texture of hair that I had. I didn't know my hair was all wavy and straight. I didn't know that because I didn't know. We wore afros. We didn't know what our hair texture was. So yeah, that's the history behind that. So listen, this is Life Interrupts Us, the podcast. You see that this episode got interrupted by the Jerry curl. Stop, drop, do the Jerry curl. So I
It
hope
was a
that
dance?
that's yes, it was a dance and that was a song. Um,
There's
again,
nothing
my
in
lovely
there.
guests that were with me tonight, my daughter and my wife. I want to thank them again. Shout out to Mika. Shout out to Milan. I hope that you catching the vision. Die empty, man. That's all I got to say. Die empty. We'll see you next time. Be good.